Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Daniels, and I'm a director in the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management at the U.S. Department of Energy. And I'm also one of the 4 co-leads of the Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage Initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial. And it is my pleasure to introduce today's CCUS event as part of the official program of the 12th Clean Energy Ministerial Meeting. Our CCUS initiative has 12 government members, and we collaborate to accelerate CCUS together. We provide a platform for governments, industry, and the finance sector to come together to advance CCUS, working to identify new investment opportunities and to share knowledge and best practice from government policy and project development. Today's event is a particular highlight as we bring you ministers, government officials, and industry and finance sector executives to discuss recent developments and future visions in carbon capture across several countries and several regions. We will first hear short recorded ministerial interventions by my own Secretary of Energy here in the United States, Ms. Jennifer Granholm, and then by Suhail Mohammed Al-Mazrui, Energy Minister of the United Arab Emirates. After the statements, we'll move to a panel discussion with government, industry, and finance sector leaders. On behalf of the members of our CCUS initiative, thank you very much for your time and attention today. I hope you find this event with us very interesting. See you shortly at the panel session.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the U.S. Department of Energy, I want to thank you for convening this important discussion on how we can accelerate CCUS together as part of this 12th Clean Energy Ministerial. As we all know, the road to COP26 is a very busy one. We're all working to raise our climate ambitions ahead of the conference. In the United States, I'm sure many of you are aware, President Biden has committed us to reducing our emissions by 50% by the end of the decade, reaching 100% clean energy by 2035 and net zero emissions by 2050. And we all know the clean energy technologies that we already have can get us most of the way there. So they'll just take time to deploy. And in that time, we're going to be producing more emissions that can't go unaddressed. That's why we need CCUS. It's why we need carbon dioxide removal. The Department of Energy has helped to advance these technologies through our demonstration program and through front-end engineering and design studies. And we have seen great progress in the last decade. Together, there are more than 65 commercial CCUS projects in various stages of development worldwide. President Biden's American Jobs Plan would add 10 additional carbon capture demonstration projects to that list, centering them in fossil energy communities so we can make sure that the clean energy transition involves equitable workforce development. And through policies like our 45Q tax credits, which support greater research and development and deployment efforts, we can improve this technology even further. But we cannot get where we need to be. We can't get there alone. We need all of you. If we can get government and industry and finance working together on a truly global scale, there will be no stopping the momentum for CCUS deployment. So DOE is committed to working with our global partners through major forums and initiatives like the Clean Energy Ministerial. And we really look forward to hearing from all of you and working together to advance CCUS and build a cleaner energy future for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you so much.
First of all, I would like to welcome you all to the Clean Energy Ministerial's Initiative on Carbon Capture, Utilization and Storage. The United Arab Emirates has ratified the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreement in support of this initiative. UAE as well was among First Nations to establish a strategy aiming for the diversifications of energy sources toward more green forms of energy, targeting to reduce CO2 emissions by 70% in our power sector by the year 2050. For that aim, our national oil company, ADNOC, started its carbon capture program with the launch of Al Riyada Industrial Carbon Capture, Utilization and Storage Project in 2016, with a capacity of capturing 800,000 tons per annum from a steel mill project, and announced at a later stage a plan for 5 million ton per annum target by the year 2030. The UAE's efforts to reduce emission, including increasing reliance on clean energy, boosting energy efficiency, expanding capacity of carbon capture, promoting sustainable agriculture, and implementation of environmentally friendly waste management are all targeted to reduce the carbon footprint. As submitted in the second Nationally Determined Contributions (NDCs), the United Arab Emirates aim to cut its emission by 23.5% by the year 2030, compared with 2016 levels, which makes it the first in the region to commit to an economy-wide reduction in emission. The renewable energy storage technology's limitations will be overcome by CCUS, and there is a role for blue and green hydrogen to be explored in the coming decades. There is a need to do more to overcome challenges with the technology, including reducing capital costs, designing technical solutions to overcome the full integration with the existing energy systems. We're looking forward to the next meeting of CEM 12, where CCUS Initiative will be presented. We confirm UAE commitment to support the acceleration of CCUS with the collaboration and facilitation of the international platforms of the Clean Energy Ministerial. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm pleased to have this opportunity. I'd like to share a few brief insights into Dutch climate policy, and particularly the role foreseen for carbon capture and storage. As the IEA underlined in its recent Net Zero 2050 roadmap, international cooperation is essential to ensure that we fulfill our national climate goals. And this is why we feel that the Clean Energy Ministerial is an important platform. It enables us to exchange knowledge and best practices with countries that face similar challenges. Sustainable energy policy is not a policy of exclusion. We need all energy sources and techniques to reach national and international climate goals. And therefore, the Netherlands play an active role in different CEM work streams. Amongst others, the CCUS Initiative. The Netherlands is at the beginning of a crucial decade for taking action on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and accelerating the energy transition. In 2019, the Dutch Climate Agreement was established. This agreement aims at reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the Netherlands by 49% by 2030, compared to our levels in 1990. CCS has an important role to play within this goal, especially when it comes to the decarbonization of our industrial sector. To this end, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy has taken steps to establish an enabling policy framework for CCS as part of a package to stimulate the deployment of all low-carbon technologies. I am pleased to see considerable efforts from the Dutch industrial sector in taking action as well on climate change. For example, recently it was announced that the Porthos CO2 transport and storage project has been awarded up to 2 billion euros in government support. Planned to commence operating in 2024, this project involves capturing 2.5 megatons of CO2 per year from industrial sites in Rotterdam, transporting it by pipeline and storing it permanently in depleted gas fields in the North Sea. This project alone can achieve a reduction of approximately 10% of the total emissions of this important industrial cluster. Crucially, however, the transport infrastructure will be built oversized to allow even more CO2 to be transported and stored in the future. Projects like these underline the potential for CCS to make swift and significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions, to contribute to reaching the goals set in the Paris Agreement. So let's reap the benefits of today and learn from each other's best practices. We're all in this together. I hope you enjoy the remainder of CEM CCUS meeting and wish you all the best of luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back and welcome to our panel discussion. I am joined today by 4 experts and personalities to discuss recent progress and future vision for carbon capture investment. In the panel are Ms. Vicki Holub, President and CEO of Occidental Petroleum, Ms. Zoe Knight, Managing Director and Group Head of Sustainable Finance at HSBC Bank, Mr. Khalid Abeli, Lead Climate Negotiator for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Mr. Anders Hoffman, Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Danish Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities. Welcome to you all. Today we'll be talking about the role of CCUS in our global decarbonization efforts. As background for our discussions, I think it's useful to reference the IEA's new Net Zero by 2050 report that was published just a few days ago. The report provides a holistic roadmap to net zero emissions and calls for nothing less than a profound transformation of how we produce and consume energy. It calls for stronger government targets and stronger private sector actions. And once again, perhaps more than before, the report says that carbon capture is absolutely vital as part of our portfolio, from power generation to industry and increasingly to direct removal of CO2 from the atmosphere. The IEA Net Zero by 2050 scenario tells us that CCUS should be at a gigaton scale by 2030, and this is rather astounding. So it's great to have you all on the panel today, and we can discuss how we can make this rapid progress starting today. The theme of this year's CEM Ministerial is turning our current ambition into a decade of delivery, and it's clear that this decade will be pivotal for all of us. So let's jump right into the questions. Perhaps to set the scene, later this year, COP26 should be a global milestone to agree on significant next steps in the global fight against climate change. Khalid, could you outline for us the path to COP26 and also comment on the role that CCUS can play in the process?
Yes, CCUS is actually our core competence, and so we've made it the foundation of our low carbon strategy. And by doing that, what we have done is taken an expertise and experience that we've developed over the last 40 years, and that is to take CO2 and use it in enhanced oil recovery reservoirs to produce additional oil from those reservoirs. So that is to recover the most possible oil. Now we're leveraging CCUS to further enhance that, because in our belief, and we have to do it in a couple of different ways, which I'll describe a bit later, but in our belief, you have to first be able to capture CO2 from the atmosphere, because CO2 in the atmosphere has more than doubled since pre-industrial times. In addition, you need to ensure that we're capturing emissions from industrial sites today. So atmospheric and anthropogenic CO2, along with then using those products, not only for enhanced oil recovery, but to make other products, are ways that we feel like will help us to get to our goal.
Great. No, thank you very much, Vicki, for starting us off. Khalid, do you want to follow up on that? And
yes, absolutely. Just building on that, what Vicki has said, let me just give you a small snapshot on the importance of COP26 at the end of this year. No doubt that this is a long-awaited COP that is taking over 2 years for us to handle. And no doubt that this COP is extremely important because it's going to be starting the decade of action for the Paris Agreement, which is the year 2020. This COP is going to be a COP of ambition in all tracks, as a matter of fact, an ambition of countries raising their NDCs and raising the bar of their commitments to make sure that we are meeting the challenges that we have in front of us and meeting also many of the net zero goals that has been already announced by many of our governments. A second thing is an ambition for implementation also. We really need to have that ambition to make sure that the foundation for these commitments that we have within our NDCs are well established, and it's the way to deliver what we have accepted and put forward for us. In addition, an ambition for making enabling environment for most of these commitments to happen. And we all know that COP26 is going to be tackling many of the tools and many of the mechanisms that would really enable many of the solutions that we have. We all know that CCUS is going to be a pivotal technology. We all know that the only way to reach those net zeros that we have put ourselves in track for, the science have said clearly that it can only happen with many paths. It cannot happen without the CCUS. Therefore, CCUS is going to be an important input for us and an important factor to take into account as we chart our way to COP26.
Great. Thank you very much, Khaled, for painting that picture. Clearly a pivotal role for all of us broadly. We know that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to climate change mitigation. We know that CCUS has a wide variety of applications. Perhaps a short answer question to start our conversation off here to several of you in terms of how does CCUS fit in your country's or your organization's net zero or low carbon strategy? Let's take about a minute, sort of a rapid fire response. Vicky, I don't know if you've got anything to add of your earlier remark, and then perhaps we can turn to Anders and then back to Khaled for a short answer here.
I would just say that in support of our strategy and others to do the same thing, the President Biden and his administration are also very, very supportive of CCUS. They understand that this is what it's going to take to help us make the transition and to ever meet the goals of the Paris Accord.
Great, thank you for that. Anders, your thoughts?
Yes, I think, if you look at Denmark with the climate ambitions that we have as a country, I think we are seeing CCUS in the core of the climate policy, both actually the U to produce new types of fuels, but also very much the S in simply to get rid of some of the CO2 from the atmosphere. So very much in the core of our climate policies.
Thank you very much. Khaled, anything specifically from Saudi Arabia?
Yes, absolutely, Gerard. Saudi Arabia have taken already the decision to implement circular carbon economy as a goal for Saudi Arabia moving towards implementing the Paris Agreement. And we all know that CCUS is going to be at the heart of that strategy. And we're looking not only dealing with the point sources capturing and utilizing and recycling emissions, but also removing it from the atmosphere through direct air capture.
Great. So broad application, I think, are in all of our strategies going forward for CCUS. I think all the math and all the models suggest that it's critical across many aspects of our society. In terms of talking about how we're actually going to deploy this at scale, again, each in our own backyard, let's dive a little bit more into detail about CCUS deployment with the next questions to the Anders, perhaps we can start with you. Denmark has recently really accelerated its attention on CCUS. Can you reflect on what has led to this? What practical policy is Denmark putting into place to drive carbon capture forward?
Yeah, I think, if you look at Denmark over time, I think the role of CCUS has really changed. I don't know, about 10 years ago, I think it had sort of a bad reputation in Denmark and was something that we actually made illegal for storing of CO2. I think the reason for the current change, I think it happened like 2 years ago, was that more and more reports coming out from the IPCC, the IEA, all of them were pointing that, if you were taking climate seriously, you need to have some of these technologies in place. So I think that was really what brought the politicians around saying, okay, we need to support this. So what we've seen now in Denmark was last year, we had a very broad majority. Basically all the parties in the Danish parliament decided on a climate strategy where carbon capture, both uses and storage is a key component. I think the storage part is the one that we will be focusing on first, simply because that's what's available in the short term at the lowest cost. But we will also produce strategies for the use and really try to focus on how, especially the biogen, the CO2 coming out from our waste plants. How can we reuse that for fuel? The policy instruments we have looked at so far is we have, first of all, we will make it legal. I think that's a very good start. Then we will publish a CCS strategy within the next month. So I unfortunately can't sort of reveal all the details, but within that there will be a major subsidy schemes simply to kick off the value chain in Denmark. So to really to get both the capture unit started, the transport and the storage in Denmark started. So a full carbon capture and storage value chain scheme. So I think that would be the most, that's where we have the most focus at the moment. But get back to us in a month's time and I'll be able to tell you more.
Great. No, thank you for that. And again, it's exciting to hear about all that forward progress there. And again, I think the whole of the kit here across the entire stream is extremely important as we progress to deploy CCUS at scale. Maybe turning to Vicky, Occidental has been a leader in CCUS in so many ways, and personally, it's been wonderful to work with you and your colleagues over the last number of years in the United States. Can you talk about your ongoing CCUS projects and what's made them possible?
Yeah, we are attacking both, as I said earlier, anthropogenic and atmospheric CO2. On the anthropogenic side, we've already signed agreements with White Energy to take the CO2 from their 2 ethanol plants in the state of Texas. We'll also be taking anthropogenic CO2 from a cement plant in southern Colorado. And on the atmospheric side is something that's incredibly exciting to me, and that is that of the 3 types of direct air capture technology, we have selected the one that we think is most scalable. And so we will be building the largest direct air capture facility in the world in the Permian Basin starting at the end of 2022. We're already in a FEED study. We've already selected our contractor to build it, and we're now in the front-end engineering and design phase. And what it will do is capture 1 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, and then we'll sequester and use the CO2 in our Permian reservoirs. So we feel like that is the best way to make this technology better over time and ultimately economical without what's enabled it to happen today. And your other question was what's enabled it to happen, and that is the passage of 45Q, or the Future Act, which provides tax credits for the development and the investment technology. That's very, very helpful. That was started by Senator Heidi Heitkamp. It's very helpful to us. The other thing that's helpful to us is the California Air Resources Board Low Carbon Fuel Standard. That will enable us also to get some funds to help with the building of the technology. And that's what's most important, is to provide the incentives that help us advance the technology versus, so along with that, I did want to say one other thing about a kind of interesting thing that we're doing is another use of it is we've partnered with Cemvita in Houston to actually develop CO2 from ripening bananas and to convert that CO2 into bioethylene. And so that's another project that it's a small project right now. We're building a pilot plant, but ultimately it's going to take a lot of these kind of ideas to advance to get us where we need to be.
Great. Well, thank you for those examples. I think clearly opportunities to stack not only federal policy tools, but also subnational, or in our case, state level policy tools to find ways to get to projects that work from a business perspective. So thank you for those, and I look forward to the exciting topics you mentioned there at the end. Perhaps, Zoe, we could turn to you as our guest from the financial sector here. ESG and sustainable finance is a major trend in the finance industry today. I was wondering if you could give us your views on what impacts you think this can have on CCUS deployment, and if you could also briefly discuss the potential role for the new EU taxonomy of sustainable investment on driving investment in CCUS forward. That would be wonderful to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Thanks, Gerard. And for sure, ESG is a major theme right now. And in fact, the green bond market broke the $1 trillion mark in issuance in 2020. And there are major drivers in place that are helping investors get a little bit more sophisticated in how they look at underlying climate solution technologies like CCS. But what's relevant right now is the rise of sustainability-linked products. Now, why is that important to investors? Well, investors are being pushed to take a little bit more of a closer look at the activities that they're financing and the emissions profiles associated with those activities. Now, the green bond market makes that very straightforward because it's linked to a specific activity. What's different about the sustainability linked market is that the financing can be attached to a particular metric. Now, that might well be the reduction in emissions, or it might be, in particular, if you're a utilities company, the scale up of renewable capacity. But in effect, this gives a broader scope to how companies can really demonstrate that they're meeting the climate problem. And that's interesting for investors because, of course, they want to deploy capital to make a success of the climate issue in terms of solving it. So just to give you a little bit of context here, in the first 4 months of 2021, we saw over 50% of the issuance from 2020. So that momentum in green and sustainability linked is certainly still there, despite the COVID effect and despite the way our economies may well be going. Now, what that means for companies is they can provide proof of concept that a CCUS facility will have a direct impact on the environment around it. And hearing from Vicky and Occidental, that's clearly a demonstrable case where we can promote the climate solution further. Now, what investors are doing in particular is measuring CO2 impact. So this transparency point and clarity around which activities are climate aligned, so to say, is important for them to get faster at deploying capital, and that's where the EU taxonomy comes in. So this provides a particular help because it categorizes different activities that are necessary for industrial decarbonisation, right? Because investors have gone through that very straightforward phase of, you know, we need to electrify and we need to do that from renewables. Actually looking at how industry, and heavy industry in particular, is going to meet decarbonisation goals is a much trickier topic, and they need a little bit of guidance on what classifies as a transition framework and what classifies as a transition activity. So all of that's moving forward. There's a lot of work still to do, and there's a lot of work that investors need to think about in terms of knowledge and capacity building in this space. It's not always clear how CCS is an improvement on the emissions backdrop, but for sure we're working together to try and move that forward and working with companies in order to understand how their industries are working.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Zoe, for that, for those insights. As a government employee, it's always good to hear the perspective from the finance industry. If we're going to have policies that push this forward, we're going to have industry that we heard from with Vicky that are going to build, own, and operate this. And we need the financial sector as partners to find ways to let the financing flow. So thank you for that detailed insight into what you just provided. Given all the actions that we've just heard from across government and industry and the financial sector here, I'd like to turn our conversation now toward opportunities for international collaboration to speed or accelerate deployment of CCUS, again, consistent with the modeling and analysis that is the backdrop for our conversation here today. Khalid, perhaps we could start off with by turning to you again. What opportunities do you see for collaboration on CCUS within the Gulf region?
Gerard, if there is any region that could have a competitive edge in moving CCS, would be the Gulf region. As you know, this region has been working for over 8 decades on oil and gas industry, and they really have captured so much knowledge and know-how and technologies for separation, capture, utilization, also recycling of emissions out of that industry has been a great effort of that part of the industry. Not only that, as a matter of fact, even in the subsurface, there have been great knowledge on the reservoirs and fields and their applicabilities and their strength and possibilities of keeping emissions and storing emissions in these fields. And not only that, but also they do have great knowledge in the area of monitoring, reporting, and verifications of many of those fields, and ensuring that those fields are working well. So if you look at all this together, you'll see that the know-how, the knowledge, the technologies that exist, and CCS has a great potential. I mean, not only that, but they could have really a great edge in moving this technology forward as part of this. So the opportunity is great within this region.
Crystal clear. Thank you, Khalid, for that response. Perhaps, Vicky, we could turn back to you in a simple question in terms of what wishes do you have for durable government policies in the area of CCUS? You already mentioned some that you've found success with in the United States, but given that Oxy operates in the US, Middle East, Latin America, are there government policies or business model lessons that emerge from one particular region that may be applicable or helpful to accelerate CCS deployment in other regions around the world?
Yes, I think the most important thing is to develop policies that help companies to develop the technology. It's, to me, this is a technology play. And to get to where we need to be, there's got to be a lot more done of what we're doing today. For example, to offset just half of the aviation industry's emissions, we would have to build 1,000 of these direct air capture facilities. So there's a lot to be done. So we're trying to accelerate as quickly as we can this technology to make it work. The U.S., what's happened here with the Future Act, if they could modify one part of that, and that is to have it, instead of a tax credit, a direct pay. And because using a direct pay would enable us to further accelerate development of the technology. And if other countries internationally could consider similar ways to do it, either similar to the Future Act or similar to the California Air Resources Board Low Carbon Fuel Standard, both of those are more incentive rather than punitive after the fact. And punitive after the fact is going to mean that the companies would pass that cost along to the consumer rather than using the incentives to develop technology to get us further down the road and get us to where we need to be.
Great. No, thank you for that. I think it's always interesting when we look across countries and governments, national and subnational, simplistically, there are carrots and there are sticks, and many people prefer carrots in order to find the ways to get things deployed at scale. So thank you, Vicky, for your thoughts there. Anders, perhaps we could turn to you in your region of the world in terms of, are there lessons learned from other countries and with your Nordic neighbors that you think may be useful in your own context? And perhaps you could also reflect on how you collaborate with your neighboring countries.
Well, if I should start with lessons learned, I think there's basically three countries we have been looking at. The Netherlands, we have done, what are they doing in Rotterdam? We haven't been in the details, but we've been sort of inspired by that. We have looked at the UK. I think we were quite excited about sort of their more sort of cluster approach, where really sort of focusing on regional areas to get some economics of scale to the infrastructure. I think we found that quite inspiring. And then, of course, our Norwegian friends. We have basically read all their documents, tried to copy some of the ideas. I think we would be doing it in a slightly different way, but I think there was a lot to learn from Norway, and they've really sort of paved the way for a lot of the ideas that we'll be also doing in Denmark. I think we will be able to do it slightly cheaper, but that's the advantage of stealing ideas from others.
Absolutely. I think we're all here because we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us. So absolutely, fully agree with your last comment there. Thank you for sharing those perspectives and views. Zoe, perhaps we can turn to you for our last sort of in-depth question that we have time for today. In terms of, we've just heard a lot of ambition from governments and industry to deploy this and develop CCUS projects at scale. A question to you is, how ready is the banking sector to seriously invest in CCUS? Are there aspects of international collaboration that could particularly be of interest to banks in general?
So for sure, there's seriousness. The trickiness is knowing exactly how to really assess each project from a risk perspective and understand how the CCS application can be implemented into a company climate transition plan or a business as usual plan in order to drive future value. Now, why does international collaboration help with that? It alludes to some of the points that Anders made around clusters, industrial clusters, de-risking projects by having a supply side and a demand side and existing infrastructure that can help with that scale up. That's really important, and it signals transparency. It signals ambition in terms of meeting climate plans. So the other point that investors like is certainty, and of course you don't get that very often. But the nationally determined contributions do at least provide an outline of how countries might want to meet their climate thinking and their emissions reduction goals. But we can really start to see an uptick in appetite for wanting to understand this. I think to move forward, the banking sector needs to do a couple of things. One, it really needs to understand the technology a lot better so that it can really kind of price the financing effectively. It needs to get on top of liability risk. So there are worries, either justified or unjustified, around CO2 leakage and how that might play into any future liabilities for companies and affect the future cash flows and ability to pay back. And also just a general maturity curve, the understanding of where CCS fits into heavy industry versus power versus transport, and just really mapping that jigsaw a little bit more effectively. And the international collaboration point can help with that, because it showcases where CCS fits into a decarbonisation strategy at a country level, and how international companies are working together to collaborate to see these projects through and make it happen.
Great. Thank you very much, Zoe, for those thoughts and insights. I'd love to ask all of you questions all day long, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to wrap up this fascinating panel discussion. Perhaps we can have one more quick, rapid question to each of you as a final question. Perhaps we can just go in line, Vicky, then Zoe, then Anders, and Khalid for your 20 or 30-second response. And the question is just in general, how could, what could be better coordinated on a global level to achieve the rapid CCUS deployment we all seek? And is there anything in specific where our clean energy ministerial process can be most helpful? So again, Vicky, Zoe, Anders, and then Khalid in rapid order.
I'd say, to Zoe's point, collaboration. We would love the opportunity to collaborate with banks, especially banks, to help you understand our technology. We want to share that information. We want to be transparent. And so we welcome the opportunity, because with collaboration, we can all learn to trust each other a bit better if we can learn exactly what's going on and be transparent with information. So we'd love to do that. The thing that the CEM could do is to help us with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, because that does provide some transparent incentives and ways to reduce emissions. And if we could do that globally, there are a lot of countries now signed on to the Paris Agreement. We're back there. And so I think if we could collaborate, as we're collaborating on the technology and how to make it happen, collaborate on what could make it happen faster. And I believe Article 6 could be a solution to that.
Great. Thanks, Vicky. Zoe, your thoughts?
So the financing points, blended finance through government support, could be helpful in order to sort of drive company strategies with country strategies to achieve climate goals. And also, similarly to Vicky, this resolution of Article 6 would really, really help provide a better roadmap of how credits will be captured in the global climate landscape.
Great, thank you. Anders, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, could I wish for a global high price on CO2? I think actually, because I think when we look at it, the key sort of challenge is that you still have a gap between the cost of CO2 and the price of CCS. So I think, I mean, getting a higher price would be, of course, extremely helpful. But for a second best, I mean, of course, I mean, what would be the incentive schemes? I mean, sharing best practice on that. I mean, we have had some discussion about that, whether they should be feed-in tariff types, direct subsidy. I mean, those type. I mean, what can we do as government to get the private market to actually stimulate deployment of this at a great scale?
Great, thank you. And Khalid, please, final thought.
There is not much, Gerard, that I could add, but it's very clear. CCO is proven and ready. Incentive is an issue that we need to work on, exactly as Vicky and Zoe, as well as Andres. We really need to work hard in finding those opportunities and those incentives for it to happen. But also we would like to have, exactly as Vicky said, the collaboration among all stakeholders, government, the private sector, the technology providers, and the finance and investors, working all together to make sure that this is happening. And last but least, and I really hope that most of us, governments, take this issue seriously, because we know that without CCUS, we will not be able to reach our net zero ambitions. And we really need to include this in our NDCs and take this as part of our efforts.
Great. Thank you, Khalid, for those remarks. And thank you all very much for being part of this panel to discuss carbon capture, utilization, and storage today. I enjoyed it, and I hope all of our audience did, and I hope we all learned something from your perspectives as well. This was clearly stimulating conversation. I wish we had more time, but perhaps in the interest of time, I could wrap up with a few takeaways that I took home today. I think we know that CCUS is vital for reaching the Paris Agreement goals. That is crystal clear. There seems to be strong consensus amongst government, industry, and the financial sector on this point, and we've heard that from our panelists here today. I think they've also confirmed that CCUS is part of a broader portfolio. There's no silver bullet for solving all of our problems, but it's an important part of that overall set of solutions that must be tailored for each of our specific circumstances. And it's clear that working together, as we just heard from this last question response, there's much we can do together to accelerate CCUS globally. And I think our CEM CCUS initiative looks forward to working with all of you and others to leverage our efforts and combine strengths. I think as this event has shown, our initiative is well positioned to help accelerate CCUS by fostering the creation of the required policy frameworks that we talked about, sharing best practices that others can learn from, and really bringing together, like we have today, governments and industry and the wider investment community to all work together to progress and accelerate CCUS deployment at scale. So on behalf of all my colleagues on our CCUS initiative, I'd like to thank all the ministers for their support of our initiative. I'd also like to thank the government of Chile for putting together such an amazing clean energy ministerial during this week and for hosting us today virtually. And to everyone in the audience, thank you very much for your time and interest today. Please do get in touch with us if you would like to learn more or engage. And we look forward to meeting with you and seeing you again. Goodbye to all, and stay well.